Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Friday, the 12th of September. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, questions mount over the British Prime Minister's judgment as he sacks his ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, after Bloomberg's exclusive reporting on his ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
The FBI releases footage of a suspect in the killing of US conservative activist Charlie Kirk and a reward of up to $100,000 for information.
Plus, kicking open Europe's IPO window. We look at a flurry of listings that suggest the tariff-induced caution of recent months may have passed.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK's Prime Minister is facing growing questions over what he knew about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein when he appointed him as US ambassador. Keir Starmer fired Mandelson after Bloomberg published a series of emails between Mandelson and the convicted paedophile. The messages show the former ambassador offered Epstein support and advice after the financier's conviction in 2008 for soliciting sex from a minor, saying, quote, "I think the world of you." Peter Mandelson's ties to Epstein were known when he was made ambassador, although he denied that they were extensive and said he regretted them. But Starmer's office concluded that Bloomberg's reporting showed the relationship to be closer than was known about. Here's what Foreign Office Minister Stephen Doherty told the House of Commons.
The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment.
Stephen Doherty speaking there. The timing could hardly be worse for the British government, which is preparing to host US President Trump's state visit next week, as the American leader is facing questions of his own about his relationship with Epstein.
The FBI has released footage of the suspect believed to be involved in the shooting of American political activist Charlie Kirk in Utah. The video shows an individual fleeing the scene. Investigators have recovered what they believe to be the murder weapon, but are still searching for the culprit. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says prosecutors will seek the most severe punishment.
More than anything, we are going to catch this person. Last thing I will just say is we've been working with our attorneys, getting everything that we need, affidavits ready, so that we can pursue the death penalty in this case.
Utah Governor Spencer Cox speaking there. He also accused other countries of spreading disinformation about the incident and trying to cause unrest in the US. A reward of up to $100,000 is now being offered for information about the killing.
NATO is preparing defensive military measures to strengthen its eastern flank after Russian drones crossed into Poland this week. Military planning is being led by Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, Alexis Grinkovich, who is assessing the situation and what supplies may be needed.
And just as you are committed to us, we are committed to you. NATO land forces forward, led by Germany, with additional contributions from Belgium, Czechia, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Norway, are here and growing. Germany will permanently station a brigade in Lithuania. This is a major step to strengthen our deterrence and defense on the eastern flank of the alliance.
That's the top US commander in Europe, Alexis Grinkovich, speaking during a visit to Lithuania. Poland yesterday asked allies for additional air defence systems and counter-drone technology to better protect against Russian incursions, with offers of assistance starting to come in. President Trump said the incident could have been a mistake, but expressed his frustration with the event that has alarmed Warsaw and other NATO allies.
OpenAI says that it's closer to converting into a for-profit company, which would include giving its non-profit arm $100 billion in equity. The maker of ChatGPT announced it's nearing the end of months of negotiations with top shareholder Microsoft to overhaul its structure and unlock an eventual public listing. The $100 billion stake would also give the company a roughly 20% share of OpenAI if it closes a deal to let employees sell shares at a valuation of $500 billion.
The leaders of OpenAI and Nvidia are planning to invest billions of dollars in UK data centres when they visit the country next week. Bloomberg's Freddie Fulston has more.
US President Donald Trump is on a state visit to Britain next week, but he's bringing with him OpenAI's Sam Altman and Nvidia's Jensen Huang as part of a group of American executives. They're poised to invest tens of billions of dollars in artificial intelligence, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer has promised to turbocharge AI to help grow the UK economy. Bloomberg now understands OpenAI and Nvidia are working with London-based Nscale as part of a $1 billion deal to build data centres. In London, Freddie Fulston, Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg understands the ECB policymakers are convinced that no further interest rate cuts are needed to deliver 2% inflation, barring a major shock in the euro area. The European Central Bank has kept interest rates unchanged at 2% for a second meeting in a row yesterday. New ECB forecasts show inflation staying close to 2% target and growth holding steady, even as Donald Trump's tariffs and political turmoil in France weigh on sentiment. ECB President Christine Lagarde signalled confidence that inflation is under control.
The disinflationary process is over. Inflation is where we want it to be. Latest reading 2.1, 2.1, medium-term outlook on target. In the same breath of air, I say that we decide, meeting by meeting, that we are data dependent and that we will decide accordingly in order to make sure that we stay in a good place.
ECB President Christine Lagarde speaking there. Traders reacted by dialing back bets on more rate cuts. Meanwhile, in the US, underlying inflation rose as expected in August, keeping the US Federal Reserve on track to cut interest rates next week.
In a moment, we'll bring you more on the fallout from Bloomberg's exclusive reporting on those emails between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson and what it means for the British Prime Minister now. Plus, why Europe's IPO pipeline is starting to look a little more rosy after a latest string of listings. But another story you've been reading this morning on photo editing tools. And could this be what lifts AI to the next level for internet users? This is what Bloomberg Opinion's Catherine Thorbeck has been writing about. She got a preview of one of the new Chinese tools in this area. She tried to use it to restore a photo of her late grandfather. That didn't quite work as planned, but she was able to generate some interesting images by just pulling inspiration from images available online. So she was able to make one of President Trump holding up a bedazzled Labubu doll, for example. Although interestingly, when she asked the software to do it for Xi Jinping, it did not respond to that request. But she's talking about, I suppose, the potential for advertisers and consumers of if you can create photos that are essentially manipulated by AI, this could be the path to monetization for some of these tools, which is, as you know, one of the really big questions about AI, the multi-billions of dollars being poured into this technology, but oftentimes it's not actually yielding the results or the return for those companies just yet. Of course, the other side of this is the risks involved too. When you start putting manipulated photos out there, how do you control it? How do you flag it to internet users? But an interesting thought, I suppose, on that moment of where we are in AI now. And of course, the big question is the technology evolves so fast. How do you keep up with regulating it, monitoring it, trying to understand the sort of impact it can have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you are already seeing how AI, I mean, just since January, when I was downloading a whole suite of different AI applications just to kind of have a go and see whether I could use it or not, it feels like this September, in that space of time, it has already really dawned on people how much it's going to revolutionize different industries. And I think advertising is absolutely key. If you do play around with the tools, I've put myself in all sorts of different outfits. Yeah, exactly. It is strange and interesting, but you're right. It's also about regulation. I mean, I think this goes to the point that we were making earlier about data centers in the UK. So next week, this expectation of billions of dollars being invested into creating data centers in the UK. Part of that is also to do with the slightly tougher regulations that there are in the EU around artificial intelligence. But, you know, if it also supercharges growth in the UK, will it be worth it? I think that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And of course, those data centres, something that is going to be announced as part of Donald Trump's visit to the UK. The big story now overshadowing that visit is the sacking of Peter Mandelson, the British ambassador to the US, after his ties to Jeffrey Epstein were revealed in those emails published by Bloomberg. We have our Bloomberg Opinion columnist Rosa Prince with us for more on that as well. Rosa, you've been writing about this story. What was it in these emails revealed by our reporting that made it impossible for Peter Mandelson to stay on?
Well, when he joined the government as UK ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson would have had a thorough vetting to make sure there were no issues in his background. Now, what the government is saying is that he wasn't fully transparent about the extent of his friendship and relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. As the emails that Bloomberg published yesterday showed, the friendship was very close and continued after Epstein had been sent to prison for the first time, and even included kind of lobbying for him to seek early release. It suggested that he didn't believe that the crimes he were accused of were valid, that perhaps the accusers were not telling the truth, and it definitely showed that he wanted Epstein to fight to get out of prison early. Keir Starmer and his team are now saying that they felt that that was not disclosed to them at the time, that this was embarrassing, and in the circumstances he had to go.
Look, Peter Mandelson was dubbed, the first spin doctor. There was always this possibility, wasn't there? I mean, the reason that he was hired was for his business ties, his network in both politics and business. And so I suppose there are questions now about Keir Starmer and whether he got the balance right. Does it raise questions about the Prime Minister's judgment in picking Mandelson?
Yeah, I wrote in my column yesterday that I think it really does. It was always a risk to hire Peter Mandelson. He's got such a long reputation. He had already had to resign from the cabinet twice. Trouble seems to follow him wherever he goes. Now, he does have undoubted talents, as you say. He's very good at getting on with people. He's very effective. He's very smart. But Keir Starmer was taking a risk when he hired him, and I think it's a risk that has not paid off. There was this sort of sickening air of inevitability about this scandal. And I also think that what it highlights is the fact that Keir Starmer's claim to have been putting the victims first at all times just isn't true. If he'd really thought this through, I think he would have appreciated that it wasn't worth it. And he's now paying the price, not just, as you say, having lost his ambassador on the eve of a very important visit by Donald Trump, but also in his own political standing. It's 2 weeks running now that he has stood up in the House of Commons during Prime Minister's question time and defended someone very close to him, who were in such indefensible positions, really, that within hours they had to stand down. And I just think that's not a very good look for the Prime Minister.
Rosa, this is happening at a time that we're just days away from Donald Trump's visit to the UK. Now, the key point person between the UK and the US won't be there. How much of a problem is that going to be?
I don't think it's a huge problem in terms of the logistics, the arrangements, everything that's going on with the visit. That's all been done. The hard work has been done thanks to those skills that Peter Mandelson has. He had a very able number two in the form of James Roscoe, who is now in charge of the embassy. So I think the visit from that point of view will go ahead just as it was planned to. I think that it will not please Donald Trump to have this big fuss just as he travels to the UK. Obviously, Donald Trump has his own issues with the Epstein affair. He will not want that all to be amplified. He won't want to have to go into a press conference and ask questions about Jeffrey Epstein, which I think the UK press in particular will now feel they are justified in asking because of this scandal around Peter Mandelson. So the whole thing is not ideal on that front.
Yeah, and that's one significant question, isn't it, for next week, how the Prime Minister is going to navigate that during the visit.
That's right. There are a number of moments of jeopardy. They are meeting at Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country residence. There is a formal press conference planned. And as you know, there are opportunities, any number of opportunities for Donald Trump to speak off the cuff. He likes to do that. He likes being around reporters. I kind of think that in normal circumstances, he would see that as a fresh challenge, a new pack of journalists to sort of wrangle with. But in the current moment, it's such a difficult time anyway, politically, in the US, given the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He is probably not going to be in a mood for the typical banter. So I wonder if perhaps those moments, those unscheduled moments, will be less than usual. But he's coming here not in the best frame of mind. And obviously it's an important time for the UK. UK wants to talk about trade. It wants to talk about some of those deals like the investment opportunities by NVIDIA and OpenAI that we were reporting on this morning. So I think Keir Starmer is currently in number 10, just crossing his fingers that things go well next week.
Okay. Rosa Prince, Bloomberg Opinion columnist, thank you very much. You can read the latest from Rosa, by the way, at bloomberg.com/opinion. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, is the gloom over initial public offerings in Europe lifting? There's been a flurry of listings activity this week with several large issuers wading into the market. Here with more is our European capital markets reporter, Pablo Mayo Cicaro. Thank you so much for being with us, Pablo. Remind us of the context here. What kind of a year has it been in terms of IPOs across Europe?
For having me. It's been a pretty slow year, unfortunately. Going into 2025, I think deal makers expected the coming months to be quite busy and to become the start of a renaissance in European capital markets. What happened was that there was a bout of volatility in the first half of the year on the back of the tariff announcements by the Trump administration. And that prompted a lot of issuers to delay their IPO plans. And some that tried to actually pull the trigger and go public, they were forced to pull out at the very last minute. So it's been a really quiet year that now has the potential to end on a high. And we count about a dozen companies that could potentially go public in this window. So 2025 could end on a potentially very different note.
Talk to us about what's been happening this week and why that's giving some cause for optimism from here.
I think it's because of the sheer number of companies that could potentially pull the trigger and the fact that we've seen a couple of the larger ones actually go ahead and, communicate plans to go public. We have one IPO in Switzerland by a company called SMG, Swiss Marketplace Group. It's a classifieds business, and they're looking to raise around $1 billion. So that's a pretty significant offer size. We got Nova Bank in the Nordics, which is a consumer lender owned by private equity. These guys were initially going to IPO in the first half of the year, but they decided to wait for better markets. It seems like some of that volatility that we saw in the first half of the year derived from tariffs. It seems to have subsided somewhat. Equity prices are sky high at the moment. And, barring something unexpected like an escalation in the Middle Eastern or Ukrainian conflicts or some change in the economic direction of the world, then we could actually have a pretty busy window. So that's why people are getting excited about it.
Okay, so I asked this question with hope and also a bit of trepidation. Where is London in all of this? How does it compare with what's happening in Europe?
That's a good question. Look, London, we are aware that there are a couple of IPOs in the works. There's one that actually got announced earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken. It's on the smaller side of the spectrum, the beauty tech group. They're famous for this LED mask that TikTokers and Gen Zers use for skincare. There's at least a couple others. There's a specialist bank, Shopbrook, and potentially one subsidiary of the Milan-listed foods company, New Princess SPA. Now, TBD, like whether these IPOs will launch. As you very well know, IPOs are quite capricious and fickle. The market can shut pretty quickly. And at the end of the day, it comes down to investor sentiment and how they feel about it in the UK. And there's a budget coming up. So I think there's hope that we might see a little bit of a revival in London IPOs before the year is out. But there's still some question marks. And we'll be watching this very carefully.
And Pablo, just to take a step back to sort of the bigger picture, perhaps over a little bit of a longer term, what is the outlook for European capital markets now? Is the US still drawing all the biggest names for listings?
I think that we will continue to see some European companies look to the US. There was some news this week by Bloomberg that, for example, the UK Sterling Bank is starting to pivot towards a potential US IPO in the future. Some of the more tech-enabled names are tempted to go to the US because there's this perception that Europe is old economy and the US is new economy. So in particular, fintechs and technology names are tempted by the US. Having said that, this year there's been a bit of like rotation from investors toward European assets. There's a bit of excitement around Europe with the prospect of increased defense spending. Germany lifting the borrowing brakes and starting to invest into growth. So I think that we have the chance to see quite a few IPOs on this side of the Atlantic. Now, will companies continue to examine the US? I think that will remain the case for now. Europe is trying to make things more attractive to retain the highest number of companies possible. It's to be TBD whether Europe will manage to effectively do that.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.